Now, if there is anything I know all too well, it is the liminal space. That in between time, after the old identity has died, the old way of living is over, and the new hasn't fully begun. You're listening to Seeing with Serena Kumara, a podcast all about the journey of coming home to ourselves. The unlearning, the remembering, and the returning to what's always been true about who we are and what we deserve. I feel like my life experience has been that things change for me very suddenly. Now, suddenly is not the same as quickly. What I mean is it can feel like everything comes together kind of all at once overnight. That sounds really beautiful, but the other side of it is that there are these extended time periods where I feel like I'm not getting anywhere or like nothing is happening. And because that's a pattern, I have gotten the opportunity to build a little bit of a healthier relationship with the liminal. So that's what we're talking about today. How to navigate that in-between phase where it feels like the old phase is over and the new hasn't begun yet. But before we get into them, if you have not already, like, share, subscribe, send to a friend who you think needs to hear this. Now, I know from experiences what liminal phases feel like can be very different from what they are. They can feel like a lack of movement. They can feel like a pause sometimes. They can feel like confusion, and they can really just feel like endings. But let's get into what they are. So the word liminality was coined by a French ethnographer by the name of Arnold van Gennep, I think is how you pronounce it. Ethnographers are people who seek to understand cultures and communities via like immersing themselves into the culture, right? They seek to understand on their terms. And he was essentially studying rites of passage, how people move from one stage, role, or identity to the next. In his book, he highlighted that in rites of passage, there are three main phases, with liminality being right there in the middle. Later on, anthropologist Victor Turner expanded on the idea and referred to liminal phases as ambiguous and potentially transformational. Now, I'm naming them because we give credit where credit is due around here. However, what I also want to highlight is that these are people who study groups and communities that already exist, which means that the value in the liminal has been seen and honored by uncolonized and indigenous groups for a while, and there are some things that we can learn from them. Now, if we're telling the whole truth, liminal spaces have certainly not been the most comfortable for me. Me and the liminal have had a very strained relationship, and I think it can be that way for a lot of us. First of all, I don't know anybody who feels like they decide what they want and or what they don't want and really want a long time period between what they do want making it to them. I don't know anybody that feels that way. I think the other thing is because liminal phases can feel like energetically quiet. Like it can feel like either nothing is happening or I don't necessarily know what to do next or whatever. That can be disconcerting, especially if you have had a life experience where that quiet has meant something doom and gloom or negative. But as we know, there are societal factors that impact our relationship with liminality. Liminal phases can feel very hard because they are energetically powerful, but they can feel or look materially empty. And we have been conditioned to overly value the material evidence. So let's break that down. Number one, we have a very colonized view of certainty. Now, a certain amount of certainty is just kind of normal for human behavior. Like we need to know what's safe. We need to know what's important, like what danger looks like, how to avoid it, all those things. However, there is a very specific kind of relationship with certainty that comes directly from colonization. Certainty only shows itself through things like titles and money, that output of productivity, like I talk about, as a means to control it, right? We're certain that things are building and happening because we're building and doing the things. Things like metrics and documentation, and a big one is the ability to explain ourselves to other people. I'm not saying that those things cannot be symbols of certainty, but The fact that we view those as the only symbols of certainty is where the problem comes in. Because the way that I view it, things, statuses, identities can be real before they are visible or material, right? Have you ever had an experience where you feel like you stepped into something that already existed for you? Like it was, I don't know, people talk about stepping into new timelines. That's not language that I use, but I have absolutely had experiences where it was like, oh, like I knew this existed in my spirit. I felt the energy of it. And now I've just stepped into the experience of it. And there are experiences and definitions of certainty that also includes like a gut feeling, a certain kind of calm. My life has given me evidence that that thing that I was feeling was a version of certainty. But it has taken work for me not to move into some form of unnecessary doubt or over productivity or looking for signs when I already have the right sign. And so in order to see the sanctity in it, we have to be able to trust other forms of evidence that are not just material, right? The liminal can be building and becoming. Sometimes it's redirection and being positioned. And a lot of these things are happening in ways that we can't see with our eyes yet. The second reason why this phase can be so difficult is because we can experience a disorientation around our identity. Now, that has to do with the way that our society forces us to identify through categories, like our roles or our class, our career, our titles, things like that. And all of those categories also silently categorize our worth or value. So when we're in the in-between phase and one identity or title is over and we haven't stepped into another one that we feel like is at the same status or value or whatever, it can make us feel like, well, who am I? Maybe I was a professor, but I wasn't happy and I felt like I'm called to do something completely different. In that space between getting to whatever the status in the new thing is that aligned with where you were as a professor, you can feel very much like, who am I? And am I still as valuable, still worthy, etc.? And it's interesting because who we are as a soul level does not change, but societally, that is not what is highlighted as important. And so it can create what I consider a very unnecessary disorientation around our identity. And the other part of that is even when the new identity has been recognized internally, we are still conditioned to struggle with accepting it when it has not shown up externally. And again, y'all, that's about identity, okay? That's not the same as things like titles and credentials. I'm not talking about deciding internally you feel like a doctor and then going outside and taking clients when you have near your credential. Okay. Now, the last reason that we're going to talk about today is the absence of ritual. I, like the societies that came before me, see the value in a good ritual. Before colonization, many of us had structures and rites of passage that helped us to recognize and honor and move through transitions. Those rituals honored more than what we would consider the practical. It honored transitions that were spiritual, the ones that are in the body, the ones that are in the mind, and the transitions that were social and energetic and ancestral. Now, I'm not saying that we don't have any rituals or rites of passage now. We do, especially if you're a part of really any spiritual community, including religions. They all have something, but it's different now. And in modern society, really, rituals that were considered really valuable and essential can be perceived as excessive or performative or even just like viewed as a joke. But baby, before colonization, the global majority knew better. We had things like naming rituals, grief rituals, which we still again have now, like I mentioned, in modern society, but they're different. We had ceremony and practices around the land and elders and lineage and spirit. I'm huge on rituals. I think that they are important energetically, but I also think there is a lot of mental value in a ritual, especially around things like transition and even the liminal, because it helps you to name what's happening. It helps you to recognize it, and it can help you to get intentional with your mindset as into going into something. It marks the start of things. It can mark the end of things. And sometimes we need that. It also allows us to give honor and reverence to sacred experiences, and it allows us to properly identify the weight of something that's happening. Like if you knew that in between phase, that thing that feels like nothing is happening, you know that is really dead center between you leaving the old you and stepping into the new you. If you knew that, would you not ritualize it in some way? And the beauty in rituals is that we can create our own, and they don't have to look like anyone else's. You can get inspiration from somewhere, but you can just do what is valuable to you. Sometimes that's writing in your journal. Today, I felt like the old me ended. I don't know what comes next, but I'm ready for the journey, right? Things of that nature. Or I've said this before, I will throw a party. I saw someone post that she had lost a bunch of followers and she got balloons about it because she feels like that is the result of her being authentic and doing what she's supposed to do. And it's basically the misaligned folks leaving. That's a ritual. And regardless of whether I agree with her perspective, what I do agree with is that she has now become intentional with her mind frame going into this. And that's going to be helpful. That ritual that she did is going to be helpful. And sometimes the part of a lack of ritual can also translate to a lack of community support, right? Sometimes when we don't see the importance or weight of something, and therefore we don't ritualize it, and therefore we don't share it, there are no witnesses, and there's no support, and there's a lack of community. And those are all things that we need. So let me tell you what has helped me to build a healthier relationship with liminality. The first one is always to keep that self-connection strong. That's via meditation. That's via prayer. That's via divination, right? For me, there's whatever it looks like for you, that's what it looks like for me. And that is because on a very real note, part of the way I give myself peace and allow myself not to go into trying to force and control mode is that I always have my ears to the energetic streets. I'm always ready to hear if it's time for me to move, because my personal concern during these liminal phases is, am I supposed to be doing something else? I don't want to miss it if I'm supposed to be doing something. And so when I make sure that I'm not blocking it and I can trust, no, sis, you're going to hear it because you're listening for, something that points to the direction that you need to pivot. Oh, no, you're good sitting still, or wait a minute, you're missing out on something. You think this is an intentional liminal phase, but you just are scared to move. Like all of those things come through when I'm building that self connection. And that is something that I need for my personal peace. The next part of that is I also allow myself to explore feelings of fear or worry or anxiety, right? I happen to know the difference in my body between my intuition and my anxiety. That's taking years of work. Anxiety is high, intuition is low for me. So when something comes up, I give myself a body scan. Sometimes it looks like journaling. Sometimes it looks like speaking out loud and allowing myself to hear back, to check in with myself in those moments. Because again, I refuse to delude myself. We do very grounded spirituality over here. Every pause is not a liminal phase. Sometimes it's just arrested movement or an actual block that says this is not going to work the way you want to do something different. It's important for us to know ourselves and the way that we hear, feel, understand our intuition in order to know the difference and move accordingly. The next thing that I do is I stay open to the smallest signs of movement. Now, not to the point where we're making it up in our heads, but evidence that we're at least moving a little bit. Okay, wait, I didn't get pushed back in the other direction today. Okay, we're trucking along. We may not be going as fast or as far as I'd like at my speed, but little signs that things are trucking along. I really work on seeing those, but also assessing if I have not and what that might mean, which goes back to the last point. I also utilize those subconscious tools, okay? I love tapping. I very much enjoy breath work. I am a binaural beats and subliminal messaging kind of girl. I make my own to help bring down that anxiety, to help decondition the places that need to move. I utilize all those things to help myself in a less labor intensive sort of way. And lastly, I bless my experience. It has made living a lot more fun. That is operating in gratitude, allowing yourself to be open enough to view the things to be grateful for and really feel them fully. Go out of your way to find things to be grateful for. It keeps our frequency high and it keeps our eyes looking for the good rather than if the floor is getting ready to fall out. The other side of it is the ritual. Sometimes that looks like writing a love letter of gratitude for the old version of you and what they carried you through and what you learned from them and how good they were to you, even though you don't need them now, right? Bless that experience and let it go. Sometimes it's some kind of pre-celebration for where you know you're going. And sometimes it's just some kind of ritual to celebrate the now, because the other side of the liminal is that sometimes it's a period of rest that you need. Like maybe you went through a really hard cycle. I've had this experience. I went through some things that required a whole lot of mental and emotional energy, and I had to navigate through, and I made it through. And there was this extended period of time for me to be able to rest, to be ready for the goodness and the beauty that was to come, because that also uses energy. And what I did not realize is that the liminal, when I allowed myself to stop trying to make it an active period and I allowed it to be what it was meant to be, I could just rest. Everything was just okay. And I was allowed to be grateful for a period of a different kind of rest because nothing was calling me and nothing was quite ready to go. Our weekly affirmation comes from Unapologetic Affirmations, 100+ reminders of all that you are and all you deserve from your boldest self. And this one says, I free myself from self-sabotage. I recognize opportunities. I know exactly how to make the most of them and take bold action. My loves, I think that is for those of us that stress ourselves out during liminal phases because we are concerned that we will miss something. But that affirmation says you won't miss a thing. No need to stress, no need to worry, no need for anxiety. I love you. Like, share, subscribe, share with a friend, and I will see you next week. Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, like, and drop a comment. And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, follow the show, leave a review, and share it with someone you love. You can find me on Instagram at Seen with Serena and at serenakumara.com. Until next time, be wildly, radically, and unapologetically good to yourself. Love you.